Right, okay, folks. Welcome to, I don't know why I clapped there. That's probably just hurt somebody's ears. Welcome to the latest edition of the Nice and Nasty podcast. Now, the guy that I've got on today, he's a regular to the channel. I've known this guy for, I don't know, 3-4 years, something like that. If you watch the channel, you'll know this guy only too well. He's a regular on my videos. He's a good mate of mine. It's Mr. Giles Delboy. How are you, buddy?
All the better for listening to you, my friend. How are you?
You silver-tongued devil, you, eh? I'm fine, mate. I'm absolutely fine. Sorry for the teething problems there, but look, that's computers for you. So what I'm going to, I'm sure you're familiar with the format of this, Del. What I'm going to ask you to do is just give a very, very brief flavour of what you're about as it comes to games, your kind of history games. How did you end up on a Main Meister podcast?
Yeah, now I'm going to try and be a Delboy person who's not going to go over and over and on and on about it. So let's see if I can do the short version. I've been around computers for a long time. I went on a Commodore PET around about 1979. I had consoles before then, so we won't talk about those. But I would consider my very first computer, the one that the one that you bought yourself or your parents bought, as being the VIC-20. I did have a ZX80. I did have a ZX81. But I was one of those ones that was the most fortunate, I think, of people that have been around for a long time, in the fact that I managed to be part of a person who used to work in a computer store. And in that time, people used to trade in their old computers. And so, therefore, I used a lot of computers between 1980 and 84. I saw Oric Atmoses, Atari 800s. So basically, the VIC-20 was my real first computer, but my Commodore 64 was my first love. That was the one that I had sort of like the biggest amount of time for. The next computer that I bought myself was an Amiga. It was an A1000, a day one version of that, and that's the one where you go, right, now I'm exploding. Now I'm basically expanding at a level that's probably a little bit out of my control. And then we get to the PCs. So that's pretty much my history. So if you can imagine all of those years, plus all of the games that you could play, the software you could use, the school stuff that was going on where you were learning it all, I've pretty much done it all.
Yeah. So I mean, I've seen. In fact, I'll tell a lie. I think I've played Space Invaders on the Commodore PET. Was the PET not as powerful as the VIC-20? How did it compare, sort of like hardware-wise?
It's a difficult one, that, because the PET was, I consider, to be more powerful, but not so, because it didn't have a graphic chip like a VIC-20 was. The VIC-20 was when they designed something called the VIC chip. The PET had a graphic chip, but it used a different way of showing those graphics. They were like the same type of graphics that you'd get when you're. If you remember the Commodore 64's keyboard, it had these little symbols underneath the letters,
horrible
where they had sort of like called PETSCI.
Yeah, and it's those computer-defined graphics.
So lines were made up of things like slashes and lines, and so. If you wanted a 3D game, you could use things like draw commands. So you could have a vector line, but the majority, if you wanted a man running along, it would be made up of an O and an X and a.
Yeah, they were quite ugly looking games. I mean, could the Commodore PET do, like, well, I don't know, we'll take something like Manic Miner. Could the Commodore PET do Manic Miner?
I would say yes, but not the Manic Miner that you come to see. It would be like watching a Game and Watch.
Yeah, so it didn't have sprites or anything like
that. No sprites at all. So you had the ability to have more characters. You could say, I want 40 column and I want 80 column and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
which highes the resolution, but that's pretty much it. It didn't even have color. So
I was going to say, it was. Was it green? Was it a green? Was it green on black or something?
Yeah, but I mean, basically, most people call it green, but really, it's monochrome. Most people just had green monitors. Do you know what I mean? So it would be white on sort of light green on green if you had a green monitor. But if you had a monochrome, it would be white on black.
So the VIC-20 really was a step up from the Commodore PE. It had sound, it had colour graphics, it probably played quicker.
Sound.
It had epic sound. The VIC-20, I don't think it was very capable for music, but as far as like sound effects go, I'm saying we all know, us nerds amongst us know that Jeff Minter was a big fan of the VIC-20. And what was the game? Was it Polybius? No, it was Moose Life, I think it was. I'm sure he used the VIC-20 for the sound effects.
Yeah, I mean, not very good for music, but incredible sound chip, really, for its time, because it did have that sort of like so many voices. It had oscillation, so you got things like sawtooth, pulse wave, square wave, so you could manipulate sounds, but it didn't have filters, those things that make the SID chip really sort of like sing. And because of its limited octave range, it had an octave range, but about 2 octaves lower, less than a Commodore 64. So again, another restriction. So, but it had things like white noise. Don't get me wrong. It had that, but it really was a precursor to the SID. And I would say that it was above, really, a number of machines, but not things like the Atari 800. The Atari 800 was an anomaly as far as I'm concerned. Because it had a pokey chip and a graphic chip that really didn't get beat until the Commodore really came along. So if you think about it, the Atari 800 in 1979, 3 years earlier than a Commodore 64, was pushing the boundaries, but it was just so expensive.
Aye. And I think the sad thing was, I mean, I completely, I didn't have a computer. I mean, I obviously had my Texas machine for a very short space of time. The VIC-20 was a computer that I never had any involvement. I never really, I'd seen it in shops, but I never really got to see it proper. I never like got to use one, whatever. But people that I do know that had one, yourself included, they love it. It's such a quirky computer, and it had some really, really good games. It was like perfect for some arcade games. It really was.
Its limitation really was Commodore's own price cutting. I've always considered Commodore's Achilles heel is its management and its marketing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Throughout the whole of its life.
Yeah,
to be quite honest. I look at your answer there to the Texas as it wasn't a bad machine. I looked at the Texas though as being sort of like an Intellivision or a ColecoVision with a keyboard. The graphics look like that. Shockingly, how many colors can I put on the screen to make up the letters that say Intellivision? When I switch it on, the Texas, you know what I mean? And it's almost, and the keyboard was a Travelator keyboard. So basically you had a proper keyboard. Think about that. When you had your Texas, people still had ZX80s and 81s with that membrane.
Yeah.
Or an Oric with that little raised sort of like digit, sort of like chicky sort of like thing poking up. You know what I mean? People that had Oric Atmoses, they were expensive. They were damn expensive.
Oh, aye. And that was why. It's because when my mum and dad said they would get my computer, and I kind of hinted at the Spectrum, they came back with a Texas because they thought it had a nice keyboard. And to be fair, it did. They didn't realise that it was completely pants for games. Though saying that, 30 years later, 40 years later, I've I've actually found out that it was actually a very capable games machine. But anyway, we digress. So Commodore 64. Then you got an Atari. What was it? 1100. What was it called again? Atari
I had
1000.
an A1000. Yeah,
And
an Amiga 1000.
So was that your only Amiga? You never had anything else?
Oh no, I had an
Amiga-wise?
Amiga 1000. I expanded that with a sidecar and memory.
Yeah.
I had the option of swapping it out for an A2000. Somebody said, "Would you like an A2000? Because we really need an A1000 because we're going to be using this in something other than just programming and so forth, and we need that design. It's unique." And I said, "Well, yeah, why not?" He said, "Well, we'll throw in a Genlock for you. How's that?" And I said, "Yeah, fine." The A2000 had a slightly faster processor and was compatible with the A1000. And it had sort of like better expandability from taking the case off, if you see what I mean. The A1000 was a very much the same mold as of a closed box. You could take the top off, but it was still one board. You see what I mean? This thing had sort of slots like a PC that you could slot things in. So I had the ability to sort of like put in a video toaster, which is another graphic card. I could put in an accelerator board. I could put in a PC board. So it made the perfect. It made the perfect choice for me.
A bit more expandable. So what else? So there was the Amiga 2000. Was there a 3000?
There was, but my next one was an A4000.
Oh, right.
And then I only had that for 6 months.
And was that how did that compare with like an Amiga 500? Because the Amiga 4000 was always like the sort of the holy grail of Amigas. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could look at it like that. The other machines were expandable. They were easier to swap out later on for another processor. The thing I would say about the A500 was it was more in the mold of a Commodore 64. You know, it was a machine that you could throw away. You know, if it broke, you'd throw it away and you buy another one. They really were like that because they cut the design down to cheaper parts. Do you see what I mean? The case didn't really have the expansion slots that go on the side. You know, they did make them, but they were third party. Commodore didn't really make them, not that much. It's much easier to put a hard drive in a PC than it is a laptop. Take it like, you know what I mean? If you look at it like that, so for me, the 2000 and the 4000 meant that I was staying with the big boys because the A1000, I considered that to be like a PC in 1985. You see what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, now you're cooking, you know, with a flamethrower, not a gas cooker. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you had your Amiga 4000, what did your mates have at that point, computer wise? And did many of your mates have computers?
Oh yeah, my friends had computers, but like me, after they went from the A500 or an A600, because some of them had got into computers a bit later, they moved to the A1200, and then after the A1200, I think they did what just about a lot of people did, and that was just bought a PC.
Yeah.
They got to the end of their life with it and decided that was the next thing, and I dare say, because of the year, I would say Doom was the biggest reason for you to actually upgrade.
It was certainly the reason I wanted to upgrade. I mean, I had one of my mates had a PC. I had an Amiga. He had a PC. He was showing me he had things like Wolfenstein 3D, which was impressive. But that was about it. There was really nothing else in the PC that. You know, there was no way I was going to swap an Amiga for a PC when the only impressive game I could play was Wolfenstein. And then, as you say, the game changer came along, Doom came out, and, you know, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, I've got to get a PC. And that was it. That game sold that to me. So you've had a PC since then, and the rest, as I say, is history. So YouTube, from a point of view, YouTube, how did you kind of get into YouTube? I mean, obviously you you and I became friends because you were watching my channel, and then later on, after a few years, you decided to start your own channel. What prompted you to want to make your own content?
Well, I'd have to turn around and say that two people sort of like changed my mind along with my own decision, and that would be you and Panther at the time. I actually decided, though, to jump on board with YouTube in a different way than other people, and that was because I looked at my life and I thought I'm not leaving a legacy behind. My personal life was not in a good place. I'm not married. I don't have children. My father had passed on. It was just my mother and me. And I wanted to leave some sort of legacy behind. The underlying thing that was happening for me was that because my father had passed a couple of years, earlier than that, I was starting to forget what his voice sounded like. And I looked around and we didn't have a video sort of like recorder, a VHS camera. So we've got no video footage of him seeing me opening presents or me recording him at Christmas, and all of that sort of stuff. And all we've got really now of my father, and I've still got it now, is him leaving me a voicemail message on our answering machine.
Is that right?
And I thought to myself, well, I ain't going to get rid of that. It's now gold. If I lose that, then all I've got is my memory on how he sounds. And in my head,
so have you still got that answer machine with his voice in it?
Yes.
And have you backed it up at all? Like
yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah.
It's wonderful what we can do with technology these days.
Would you care to share what the message was?
He just said, "Can you tell your mum I'm going to be home a little bit later because I need to drop off the money for rod licenses, and then I'm just going to stop off and see your uncle, but I won't be too late.
Yeah,
love you loads. Bye."
Oh, bless. And that's the only recording you've got of his voice.
Yeah, I know, it's sort of like word for word, to be quite honest.
I mean, that just reminds me of, and I've mentioned this before. I remember reading an article, and it was somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody on the internet somewhere. Somebody used to play, I don't know, I think it was the original Xbox. He used to play this, it might have been Project Gotham Racing. He used to play this racing game with his dad, and they used to take turns to get the best time. And then his dad sadly passed away, and then the Xbox got put into the cupboard, whatever it was. And then when he dug it out years later, he went to play Project Gotham, and he realised that his dad had the fastest time on one of the tracks. So it was like his dad's ghost was racing, and he says he never ever he felt that brought his dad back. He was racing against his dad, and he was always adamant he never ever wanted to beat his dad, because then that would erase the ghost track. But it's interesting that technology and computer games can have that kind of effect on somebody.
Isn't that a lovely story?
I hope it's true.
I wish my father sort of loved technology like I did, but he was very much a country mouse, the town mouse, country mouse. He was definitely the person who lived on a farm, because that's where he came from, his farming background. When it comes to technology, the only thing he knew about was engines for cars, But I'd have loved to have had him play, I don't know, Mario Kart and have a ghost cart and me be able to try and beat him on it. Yeah, that would be absolutely wonderful. But the only person who really showed anything towards games was probably my sister, and I think my mum tried to play once Boulder Dash. That's about it.
So when did your dad pass away?
2016.
So yeah, I mean, was your dad familiar with internet and what have you?
Oh yeah, he was the one person that
Yeah.
Used to shout up the stairs, "Get off that damn phone! I can't make a phone call. I'm trying to phone up about," because my dad was retired for quite early,
Yeah.
and just loved fishing and all of that. But he wanted to speak to people about the reservoir and whether the water levels were higher or lower at the moment, and what fish food to take along. Wanted to tell the fish, the people that wanted to fish, all this information. But I was on the internet or the bulletin boards. So,
It's funny when I think back. I mean, my dad he loved internet. It kind of really opened his eyes to the world. My dad loved reading books. He was he was a plumber. He was a plumber by trade, but he was like a historian. He loved meeting people. He loved the history. And my dad was one of these guys. If I was ever getting in a debate or an argument with somebody about something, I'd phone up and say, "Dad, blah 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 blah," and he would just tell you the answer. My dad was my Google. You know what I mean? And he knew the answers to everything. And so when the internet came along, he he was in absolute awe of it. And through time he started up his own website and he met lots of people. But my mum, on the other hand, she passed away in 1998. She never knew what the internet was. I mean, I think my dad had maybe just got it just at the point she had passed away. And it's funny when you think of like things like just Google it or send an email. Or there was somebody said something at my work the other day there, and I just thought, for somebody who didn't know what the internet was, you think, what the hell have you just? What does that mean? What was it? I can't remember. It was something to do with IT, and I just thought that's such a bizarre thing that we've just said. It was something to do with like an authenticator or something, or I can't remember what it was. But when you think of the technology that exists now, and people that died just before it, they would never have in a million years have kind of thought.
yeah, I think even now people don't understand some of the terminology that we use now. We used to use words like handshaking.
What was that?
That we used to use in computer terms. We'd say handshaking.
Oh, I thought you said
It's like
pancaking. I think
no.
like
So
pancakes.
when two computers talk to each other, they handshake, right? And then go, what do you mean handshaking? What there's a computer hand that comes out and says, no, it's when they talk, it's what one says, are you listening? And the other one says, yes. And right, I want to talk to you, and they handshake. That's the introduction. That's what all that noise and blippy and bloppy noises are that are going down your line.
Yeah, but awesome. But yeah, anyway, listen, let's get on to the meat and bones of this podcast. The thought behind it is, I ask my guests, they're told you can pick. We're going to get rid of every video game that ever existed. You can't play anything. However, we will give you 3 games to play, and these are the only 3 games you can ever play again. You can call it a desert island, whatever it was. It doesn't matter. You can only pick 3 games, and these are the only 3 games you will ever be able to play. And on the swing side, I'm going to ask you to pick 3 games which, in your opinion, are so piss poor and awful. For whatever reason, it might not even be a good game. It might just be a game that you detest, or you think, no, that I didn't. I really wish I could eradicate that from time. So the 3 best, they're not even best games. What 3 games would you pick if these were the only games you could ever play again? Give me them in any order, and tell me why.
Okie dokie. So. Right, I'm going to introduce this by turning around and saying I've never sweated so much in my life thinking about what 3 games, the only 3 games I'm going to play next. And then I thought that was hard enough. The hardest thing in the world was thinking of 3 games that should never have been existed in its lifespan. Do you know what? You prep for things in your life, and when somebody comes up with something like that, and you've got 40 plus years of experience in
That's
this
a lot of games to pick
when
from.
it is that is like a damning question. But I just want to let you know, thanks very much for making this incredibly difficult and inviting me onto your show.
You're very welcome.
And I'm going to open up by just saying that I've not brought loyalty into this, right? So my games are because I fully believe that I would play these 3 games on a desert island, or if they were the only 3 games left. And if all the others were gone, I'd be upset. But I'm going to stick by this. The first one is going to be an arcade game. And the arcade game I've chosen is Ghosts and Goblins.
Good game, yep.
Reasons? You want to know the reasons why behind it? I've played lots of arcade games up to this point, and I loved them all. Robotron, Zerk, Space Invaders, Phoenix, all the sound effects and everything. But all through my life, I've loved stories of things like Orphorism, you know, like Arthur and the Round Table and all of this sort of stuff. And I've loved the idea of eeriness of gravestones, like the Hammer horror films and all of this sort of stuff. And over in the corner, and it was actually in a nightclub. Okay.
A nightclub?
So, yeah, it was a nightclub, right? So, of course, I was just old enough now to be able to go to a nightclub. Was this machine, and I saw this in the corner of my eye, this sort of like red blob beak sort of creature come down and pounce down and knock this thing flying. And then all of a sudden, there was this sort of like scrolling thing going on. And I walked towards it and I saw somebody playing it, and I was going, wow, this is good. And he died. And then he decided to start again, and I could see what those things were. This red thing was sort of like a devil bat. It knocked over this guy that was dressed up in a knight's costume. The girl just disappeared, and all of a sudden he was in a graveyard, sort of like going through this graveyard with all these weird creatures that were just firing things left, right, and center. And I looked at the graphics and I was going, wow, this scrolling is really smooth, because I'd seen scrolling before. Mm-hmm. Scrolling was smooth, the sounds, even I was humming the tune when I left to get myself my kebab and chips to walk home. You know, and not being able to get the girl that night. So I was humming this tune, right, going home. And there's no internet, so of course all I knew really is of the game was that game. And I went up to the nightclub the next week, and it was still there, and I started to get into this regime of going on it. You know what I mean?
And was that part of the reason you wanted to go to the nightclub? You wanted to get your fix of
well, yeah, because what would happen is that one of my other loves is going to see films, and I sort of like went with some friends, and we went to the flicks, and then we'd go to the pubs, and then we'd have far too many, and it'll get to the end, and we'd go, "What are we doing now, then, lads? We're going home." "No, we're going to the nightclub then." "Oh, okay." So we went up the nightclub, and of course, what happens is people split up, don't they, when they go into nightclubs? You know, you'll say, "Oh, you're going over there? I'll join you. I'll get the pints in," and all that sort of stuff. By around about the end of that one pint, they're so far gone that they've either walked home without even telling you, or whatever. And I was just that sort of person that went, "Oh, there's an arcade machine. I'll go on the arcade machine," because arcade machines and me were not strangers.
Yeah.
But it was just this one in a small town like I lived in was the one that was there, and it was always there, and it was there for quite a long time. So me and it sort of like became best friends when my best mates had gone off.
So at that point, what year are we talking?
1985, isn't it?
1985, yeah. At that point, I mean, I know we're kind of digressing slightly. It wasn't available on the Commodore 64 at that point, was it?
No, a little bit later.
Yeah. I mean, I have a similar sort of memories. It was such a distinctive game. I mean, games were fun to play, but there was no landmark. There was no games at that point that went, wow, look at you didn't even call them graphics. Look at the picture, whatever. I don't know what it was called. Maybe it did call it graphics. Yeah, probably did actually. But I was in I was up in a place called Kingoosey, up in the north of Scotland, and we were camping? Yeah, we were camping, and we went to this sort of one pony village place, and there was a little little cafe, and it sold sweets, and it sold. We sat down and had a bit of breakfast, and this wee guy was playing this machine, and I can just remember the noise and the sound and the clanking off armor. Like, what is that? What is that? And I went up, and this wee guy was sitting playing it, and he right along the bottom we had about, I don't know, 30 men, extra men, and it was a special game. I mean, a beautiful game. Probably one of my favourite. It's up there in one of my top 3 favourite Capcom games. So, is it, apart from having the nostalgia for it, do you actually think it's a good game, and would you want to keep playing it?
Yes, for the thing. When I was looking at this, I could have chose something that had no end. I could have had like Robotron, I could have had Berserk, all of those sort of things, and I've been equally as happy. But Ghosts and Goblins has been one of those games that's been with me, ever since I've seen it. And every time I've seen it, I've shied away from putting coins and coins and coins in to get to the end and see it. You see what I mean?
So have you completed the game?
No.
And is that you've not, when you play the game, do you only put one credit and then die, and then
I start?
Yeah. That's a bit like what I do.
Now, the lovely thing about MAME is that I could easily cheat. I could make it easier. I could put myself with 10 lives and all of this sort of stuff. But I've never done it with that game, and it gets a bad rep because it's like incredibly hard. And as you know yourself with this one, when you get to the end, you haven't actually got to the end because you've got to do it again because it's twice. But I've never turned around and really agreed with anybody that it's so hard that I just wouldn't go back to it and play it again. It's frustrating. It knocks me back. It can totally destroy me in one breath. But a couple of months later, I've still got the itch to go back and play it.
Yeah.
And I think, therefore, that it stands that test of time that I'd want it on my island.
Yeah. The thing is, you'd have all the time in the world to play it, and I'm sure you would. I mean, I was playing it a couple of weeks ago, and you were in my stream, and I said to you, "What's the best way to kill this devil?" And I think just at that point when you appeared in the stream, I got the devil and I managed to kill it, and I thought, that's how to do it. And then I did it again and I killed it really easily. So it's all about, I mean, these games, they're not the AI in all these classic arcade games. They're quite basic, and it's just about learning patterns and learning what's the best way to get around something. And so I'm sure over time you would eventually get to complete it twice. And I mean, it's such a beautiful game that I don't think you would ever. Can you imagine being so good at the game that you could just play it forever? You would love it. You would love playing it.
No, I'd never be that good. I don't think I'm that game player that would hone its skill enough that if I completed it once, I could then do it again on a flip of a coin. Now, it is one of those games as well where you probably, the most intelligent people in the world would probably turn around and say Robotron should have been your choice, because the way it's been programmed, there isn't really patterns. They're random, sort of like generated around, and you have to really think strategy based on the type of character that you're trying to shoot, because like that. With Ghosts and Goblins, it's slightly different because of the scrolling. Its hardware is just on the cuff of when things were old school, right? So when something comes on the screen and 3 suddenly creatures come on, I know for a fact there probably isn't going to be a 4/4/5 come on, because I know the hardware limitations. See what I mean? They won't be able to draw. It wouldn't be able to draw it. The other thing is they always tend to come on at the same point because that's where they spawn, right? So if you know that and you can see a pixel or something as a starting point, you'll know they're just about to come on. So you could either wade in and just keep firing, and you're going to get them because they spawn at the same point each time. But the other thing is, the hardest part of the first level, and this was what I was trying to show you or tell you the other day, those hot dog things that fly down, they start off at sort of like 3 levels, one right in front of you, one just slightly higher than you, one right at the top, right? So what you really need to do is concentrate on the one that's right in front of you and possibly do a jump and get the other one, and that will leave one left. If you keep running, That one's got to do a set pattern of coming down, which is a zigzag. So if you keep running, it's hard for it to do the zigzag because you'll keep running. You'll knock it off of the screen. So when you see those, all you got to do is concentrate on killing 2 of them and just keep running.
And just keep running, because I'll just, yeah.
And that is you learning the game or learning the pattern or knowing the limitations of the machine.
Aye, exactly.
One of the 2.
Aye. Now, listen, great first choice. I mean, I've never made any secret. It's one of my favourite games, and it's one of these games I return to time and time again. I just go and have another go, and it kicks my arse every time. But it is brutally hard. But when a game looks and sounds and plays as well as that game, it just drags you back. So you would pick it for nostalgia and longevity. You know that it's going to keep providing a challenge.
Yeah, I don't think I could be on that island until I die at 99, say. Yeah. I don't think I'll complete it.
No, great first choice. Right, game number 2, and why?
This is going to come as no shock to anybody. I love space. I love the idea that I'm the captain of something and that I've got weapons and but I've also got a job that I need to do. So it comes as no surprise, I think, that the original Elite, but I'm going to also say on any machine, I would take on to my desert island. So if you chose another machine for me and say you can only have it on that machine, I'd go, okay. Not gonna.
But what version? Bear in mind, you can pick any version you want. What computer would you like it on? Well, I believe.
I'd obviously like the one that's got the fastest and best graphics. So I'd probably choose the Archimedes because I think
that's generally regarded as the best one. I think was it Graham? Ian Brabin and Graham Bell. Graham Bell, I think it was, always said that he reckons that the Archimedes was the best version.
Yeah, it's got slightly faster processor. And you can have more of the ships on the screen at once because of that. And of course, it's got a slightly smoother palette, so it really does sort of like look nice, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
But if you'd have given me the Commodore 64 version, I'd have been equally as happy because that was the one I played, and that all with its own flickery graphics, I still played that.
Yeah, you and I both. So again, it's a nostalgia thing. Yeah, you obviously played it a lot back in the day, but is it just a game? I mean, that you think? I mean, I can't remember how many planets there are. It would keep you busy for a long time. Do you not think it would get boring after you've got your lasers, your military lasers, and what have you?
No, because I think that there's an aspect of it in regards to the trading. Okay, it's a rinse and repeat game, like you're talking about. You know, you increase your craft then increases how far it can space jump and all of that sort of stuff. But as you go from galaxy to galaxy, there's different things that you trade with. And like you're saying, there's billions of planets. The only thing that they put in it was a small piece of code that took away swear words. Otherwise, they were randomly generated planet names to go with the planets. So it is slightly a nostalgia thing, but it's also a longevity thing because I don't think I'd get bored with trading. It's almost like saying, well, your job is selling things on a dockyard. There are always something coming in that would be an item that you want or an item that that's strange. What's that then? Show me what that item is. And you can always do that to yourself in your brain. It all depends on what sort of imagination that you've got. So I always found that you had to have a pretty good imagination back in 1984 when that 85 when that game came out.
Yeah. Now I shouldn't normally do this. I shouldn't try and convince you to change your mind. But would you not have possibly thought, well, I could take it one step further and pick Elite Dangerous, or would it always be the original?
Well, that's the thing. I could have chosen that, but Elite Dangerous is Elite, and it's got much better graphics, and there's far more things to do, and all of that sort of stuff. But I was thinking also to myself, on this desert island, is have I got an internet connection? I
You've got
overthought.
internet. Yep.
I overthought all of this. You have to understand with this. The other thing I was thinking of while I'm playing these games are these lions and spiders that could kill me at any second. Are they all destroyed on this planet, on this desert island? Because they're probably just waiting in the wings just to come down and bite me and kill me anyway. But no, you could go for the higher version, and to be quite honest, you can overcomplex things. You can make things with
Stop being
too
fun.
many controls and stuff, and it would take you forever. Now on this island, I've got all the time in the world, so you could see it would make perfect sense to have the greatest one. But the nostalgia bit in you is quite right. I mentioned I did it because of the length of time that I could play the game, but also I need next to no time to familiarize myself with the controls. And it's the one that I played for more hours than the current new version. And I do have the current new version, and I have gone back to it several times. But Elite is still the one I could just load up and be virtually there.
Lose yourself.
You see what I mean? So
yeah, it's a game. I mean, again, you're picking a game that I loved. I mean, I put so many hours into it. I got to Dangerous. That was the maximum. Where did you get to rating wise?
No, I didn't get much higher than Dangerous. I don't think I've ever turned around and said that I got to Elite to anybody. And I have got a diary that tells me how far I got in my games because I wrote them down, or what level I stopped at. But I haven't got that in front of me to tell me. Yeah,
it's funny how I can remember that. I know I got to Dangerous. It's one of these things. It's just you speak to a non-computer game fan, and they go, I don't know, I can't remember. I remember playing that when I was a kid. Blah 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 blah. But I remember that because I was quite chuffed to get to Dangerous.
You see, I remember the first sort of like levels more than I do the later ones because it took me an age to get a docking computer, and until I read the manual and read the novella. Remember, this came with a novella as well that set yourself
Black
up.
Wheel by what was the guy's called again?
Oh, you're always asking me that.
Robert Holtman or something. It was
something like that.
Something Holtman, yeah.
All I know is when it comes to that game, I can just like I say, I can just pick it up and my imagination just goes bluey with it, I'm very easy to please, and I can fill in the gaps,
and
would it feel like it's like now?
Do you want the disc one, or are you quite happy with the tape?
I mean, at the end of the day, there wasn't much. We've talked about this before. That myth of it takes 20 minutes to load something in. I'm on a desert island. I don't think anything is sort of. It'll probably take me longer to make a cup of tea when I've got to light the fire with twigs. I've got no lighter and lighter fluid.
You need to go and look for some firewood and go and do a bit of fishing so you can have your tea later on.
So I don't think it mattered. And it was one of those things as well. That's the other thing. It just loaded off of one disc or one load. It was in memory. Bang.
Yeah. That's true. It was one, which was quite incredible. So no, I agree. I can totally get why you've picked that game. You've got your instant arcade action, Ghosts and Goblins, and then you've got your game that you can just chill out and just. Would you buy the docking computer, or would you prefer to leave it manual?
Oh, I'd buy it, but I've got a choice then of whether I want to use it or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's instantly like, if I'm having a lazy day, I'd go, I fancy listening to the Blue Danube. I'll put the docking computer on. Or I'd go, oh no, I'm going to do it old school. See if I can fly in.
No, great choice number 2. And your final game number 3 that you would take, pick.
Hardest thing in the world was knocking it down to 3, Alan. That's what I've got to turn around and say to you here. This was a hard decision, but I knocked it all down to this one title, which you could split into 2 if you want. It's the PC now, so we've moved into the PC line of games, and it's Dungeon Keeper or Dungeon Keeper 2. Either one doesn't matter.
Oh, Dungeon Keeper. Yes, so I'm thinking Dungeon Master. Dungeon Keeper was the one where you were playing as all the minions, aren't you? And the baddies, aren't you?
That's it. You are reversed.
Yeah.
You are actually the bad guys. And you are protecting the dungeon heart, and you're creating your dungeon. It's the heroes that are trying to come in and destroy your dungeon heart. And you are so evil that all the people that you command to actually build your dungeon, you slap about. You actually got a hand and you slapped them round the face. Get on with it.
This was when Peter Molyneux could make good games. Sadly, Peter Molyneux's fallen. The industry's fallen out of love with him for various reasons, and some of them are probably deserved. But I do think we should still acknowledge he brought some fantastic games to the industry.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And you know, I look at him with a similarity of so many other people that have been figureheads in their time. Somebody was saying the other day that he never promised anything. He actually said, "This is what we're trying to do. This is going to be this. It's going to be exceptional, and this is what." And he always put it in a way, apparently, that this is what we're trying to do, not what I'm promising to do when it comes out. That line got grayer and grayer as you got towards Fable. And Fable is the point where I fell out of favor with Peter Molyneux, to be quite honest. Didn't believe any of the I suppose you could call it bullshit. You know what I mean? So
yeah, what was I mean, I remember Fable, and I remember thinking, this is the Mackeny game. What did he promise in Fable, and why did it underdeliver? Presumably.
Oh, he just basically said it was going to be the biggest game that was going to be part role playing game, part open world, part all of this sort of stuff. Well, I'm going to have a magic system that does this. I'm going to, do you see what I mean? He did. He embellished things like this from the moment. Like Black and White was there, and Black and White he over embellished as well. It's going to be a god game, the biggest god game. You're going to be so much of a god that you've even got a Dalius with you. It's going to be a cow, or it's going to be a sacred lion, or whatever it is, and you have all these things going on. And at the end of the day, you knew you were in the limitations of the what you could do at that time. It was like coming across that invisible wall that says you actually are in a computer game. You're knocking against it. You can't go any further north, south, east, or west if you tried, because this barrier's there. That's what you found in Peter Molyneux's game when somebody over embellishes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when did Dungeon Keeper come out then? I mean, there was Populous, then there was Populous 2.
Yeah. It's a difficult one to answer that because I haven't really checked too much, but it was around Windows 95 and 98, and it was just before Power VR and Voodoo graphics cards, late 90s, and Dungeon Keeper 2 early 2000s. I would say, I guess I didn't write it down, the age. I didn't think it mattered too much as long as I told you what the title was. But that's why I said you could choose either one, because Dungeon Keeper came out at a time where I was swapping out hardware left, right, and center. I was putting in Voodoo cards, Power VR cards, changing my sound card, putting a new processor in, increasing the memory, getting a bigger hard drive, left, right, and center. And each time I did that, Dungeon Keeper would be slightly better. It wouldn't be using just a standard graphic card. It would suddenly start using glide and textures. The sound would suddenly be MIDI and not Sound Blaster. I could go on and on and on, right? And Dungeon Keeper 2 was more it comes like that. It's super VGA now. It's like really pixel sharp and all of that sort of stuff. It's that same game with a few extra bells and whistles, but now it moves fast because your processor allows it to move fast, and the graphics are pin sharp because you're now using just 3DFX. Do you see what I mean? Rather than all these other things like Power VRs and all that, because they've sort of like slipped to the wayside. They're not developing it for that. So
yeah. So what precisely was it about these games that kind of drew you in and would make you want to play that?
Well, this is the thing that makes it made it so difficult because I thought of things like Command and Conquer, Generals, Age of Empires. It is a strategy game, right? And it's a top-down isometric sort of like game, but you can spin it around in all directions. In fact, you can actually take over one of the minions and go around in first person. You could actually be one of the trolls and go around your caves that you're perpetually making. But it's that whole Lego kit feel where you've got a blank canvas and you can make this dungeon as complex as you want. You could have an alley going down here, you could have a pool going over there, you could have a room to do that over here. You could put that you're always aiming towards the seams of gold. Don't get me wrong, because you needed money, or something for the dungeon heart. But all the time there's that ticky down clock that says these good guys are coming in and they're going to have an army. And you've got to also not only protect your dungeon heart with traps, that's pretty much all you've got, because your minions are just not going to be strong enough for somebody in armor and a bloody great big sword, right, against them. It's almost like saying I've got a construction kit already built in the game without me actually needing one. See what I mean? You could actually, by the way, there was an actual construction kit in it because you could actually make your own levels. But what I was trying to get at, you made your own levels as well in the level that you actually created. You see what I mean? So it was like a construction kit within a construction kit.
And could you have monsters and vampires and what have you in the dungeon waiting to kind of attack the
well, you built rooms, and what it was is you put things inside the rooms that encouraged that type of creature to suddenly spawn. So basically there were vampires, but you needed a room that had something in it that that encouraged a vampire to spawn in there. Otherwise it would just spawn normal trolls and all that sort of stuff. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, you had to also think about that for a moment. You'd love to have a Dracula and you're going to yourself, right, okay, what do I need? You read the manual and it says, for that, you need to have this other type of creature going around. And also you need to have this other commodity that you found in the walls that you've been destroying down. And then you have to create that empty room in solitude somewhere so that it encourages them to spawn in there. And that would then become their bedroom. Like it was like their mini bedroom type thing, like a cellar or whatever. So that's the type of that's the type of thing that filled in the blanks for you, that opened your imagination to this.
It's almost kind of, I mean, just listening to you talking about it, I did play. I never played the sequel. I did play the original, and I kind of surprise. I never really got into it. I never really understood exactly what I was supposed to be doing. But it sounds like a great game, and it kind of feels almost like what the modern version would almost be like a tower defense, where you've got this army coming towards you, and you're building better and better defense turrets and what have you. It was almost kind of like the precursor to a tower defense game.
Yeah, you would, and you wouldn't be too wrong. The difference, I think, really is that in a tower defense game, the enemy are off of the screen, and they come in waves. Once you know where they're coming from, the only thing that happens is the waves get bigger, or the creatures might come to a maximum level, where they're coming in now with tanks. You see what I mean? And you've got to think about where you're going to put your weapons to stop them. And that's pretty much all you've got is you purposely put your points at bottlenecks. You know what I mean? So it's harder for them to go round a corner.
Get maximum,
that's the slowest point. So you definitely put the maximum flamethrower damage thing there, so it burns the shit out of us going round. That sort of thing. And they're always heading towards one point as well. Your dungeon cart could be anywhere.
And so if you had to, obviously you can only pick one, would you go for the first one or would you go for the sequel?
I thought about that. If you did ask me that question, I think I'd still go with the first one because it's the one I played the most. I did play Dungeon Keeper 2 an awful lot, and it did improve an awful lot, and it had all these extra graphics and it had these extra modes and all that sort of stuff. But Dungeon Keeper had such a modding community that you could then you could make it look like Dungeon Keeper 2. You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
And whatever you do, whenever you make a new one, you always love to tinker about with the interface. You know what I mean? Like this, to find this, you needed to go into this menu and then this menu and this menu, and you found, the thing you were looking for. And I knew Dungeon Keeper so inside and out that they never altered the interface, even though the modding community was there. They just basically modded what they thought that was broke. If it weren't broke, keep it as it was. So I think push comes to shove, I'd still go with the first one, Dungeon Keeper.
And did you virtually rinse it to death back in the day?
Oh yeah, played that 2 hours. Yeah.
And would you be quite happy just to keep playing it over and over again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much, very, very easy decision for me, but not when you consider that there are other games of equal stature that I could have chosen. This was the hardest thing in the world to do. I wanted a game that was long, and I could have turned around and said things like Minecraft, and I could have said Valheim. I could have mentioned one of the Command and Conquers, like the one that I really remember playing a lot was Generals and Red Alert, and I could have mentioned all of those, and they wouldn't be wrong. I chose Dungeon Keeper just purely on the basis that I know the amount of hours I put into that game, and I still don't think it's quite. I think it's still higher than Minecraft, because Minecraft was going to be one of those ones that I was going to swap it out for. No doubt of a lie. But Minecraft has got that funny thing where I go away and I don't come back for it for years. Dungeon Keeper, I could put it on now and I'd keep it on my machine. That's the trouble with me. If I loaded that game up, I would never get rid of it off the hard drive again until I needed another PC.
And can you play it now? Can you play?
Yeah. You so that you can play it on modern equipment. Like I said, I've got honourable mentions, if you don't mind me mentioning it, and that'll end this session. And that is, there was those ones like Valheim, Minecraft, all of that sort of stuff, and they were equally great, and all of them are because of longevity. But the one that I played more than any other or equal to Dungeon Keeper was my first MMORPG, right? Massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And that would be Guild Wars. Guild Wars, I played, no word of a lie, it swallowed my life and nearly caused me an addiction. Nearly caused me an addiction. And I was going to put it in there, but I didn't. I chose Dungeon Keeper. Shoot me through the heart. This is where I'm saying you're a git, Alan, for saying I can only take 3. You git. That's all I'm going to say about it.
You pick Dungeon Keeper, you'll never ever play Guild Wars ever again. But
That's it.
Anyway, listen, three interesting choices. I never thought I would hear a Peter Molyneux game getting picked because for different reasons, always over-promised and under-delivered, I think, is probably the best way to describe most of them. But, that's what I like about this podcast. It's interesting to hear everybody's got their own games that they've come up with. They've got their own experiences and fun. So anyway, it's not all jelly and ice cream now. The bad part, I don't want to give you anything, but we should have recorded this earlier because it's getting late at night and I don't want you waking up in a sweat, screaming because you're going through a bit of a nightmare. So I do apologise now for opening old wounds. What 3 games of shame would you pick that should never exist?
I sweated more than I did with the games that I was going to choose, and those were the only games. And I set myself some certain rules, and I set those rules, and I did not go over those rules. And those rules were, the reason I'm putting these in the banned list is not because I have not understood the promise of the game. I do not like the business model. I do not like multiplayer. I do not like the genre. The price does not alter my perspective of it, whether it's a bad game or not. All of those rules are in play with this. And then the first game I'm choosing, it's a game called Squidge for the Spectrum. Now, you do know what Squidge is.
I know what it is. I'll let you explain to the listeners.
So Squid is actually a legitimate game that is equally as bad, but really not that bad for the Commodore 64, and it even came out for the Commodore 16. But there's a history behind this game, and it's a terrible one, really. The guy that designed the game was very, very young, and he was given a check, and he wrote the game on another system, but he'd never programmed for the Spectrum before. So I think he got somebody else, if I remember rightly. And you'll have to tell me if I get any of this wrong. He got another person to write it, and this person also was quite young, and he'd never seen the game, wanted to do a really good job of it. So he actually went to the company to say, "Can you show me what the game looks like?" And the guy that seemed to be there, I think it was like some security guard, said, "No, you can't even see the game. As far as I was away, go away." And subsequent phone calls just seemed to indicate to this person, "You owe us a game. You've got a month, a deadline. Get it done." And so he had to code. Now, not having a compiler or any type of tools, he went out and bought an off-the-shelf one, which was actually designed by Ocean, called Laser Basic. And he wrote the game as best as he could on the Spectrum using Laser Basic, and then presented the game, and they subsequently published it. Now, there's an afterthought to that as well, because it was never tested and it came out. But people who did buy it suddenly found that there was a problem with it. But the interesting side effect to it as well is that you got a free copy of Laser Basic with this game.
Is that right?
Yeah, because you could only have a Laser Basic game work as a standalone product if you had this module that compiled it into that game. He didn't have that, so he actually gave you laser. You had to have the Laser Basic engine
to run the game
for you to run the game. So you actually got a £15 game for this £1.99 sort of like budget title that had come out. Anyway, the game came out and it was discovered that it was unplayable. A little bit in the same way that was it Terminator that doesn't work in the Commodore console because it's got no keyboard.
A complete oversight. Yeah,
right. A complete oversight in the fact that he'd programmed it and he made a mistake in the code where to move you had to have caps lock on or something. And so people that tried to play the game found that they could only move in one direction, and that was it. Wondered what the hell this game was. Subsequent magazines came out with a little line of code that you could actually type in and it would make the game work. Yeah. But when they did do that, they found that all they could do is move up, down, left, right, and fire. And they had to go around this maze. The creature was so big compared to the other versions that you didn't even see the fire coming out of its mouth. It would just either kill the creature or it didn't. And honestly, it moved as slow as a very slow thing. I can't give you an example.
Slow as shit. Yeah.
Slow as shit. It was taken off the market with no recall. So I don't know of anybody that actually sent their tapes back and got their money back. I've never seen any report of that. But they made the next mistake of putting it on a compilation tape with no change.
Right? And it still didn't work.
And it still didn't work. You have to put this code in. Now, the reason I had those rules at the beginning and the why I've put this in is no game should ever go out that's not been system tested, looked at, and this particular game is unplayable. So in an unplayable state, it should never have gone out. And that's why it should never have been made in the first place.
It quite literally should never have been made. I mean, it could have been made, but yeah, the fact that it's astonishing to think that there was so little. Quite simply, nobody obviously even tried to play the game because they would have noticed. Now, do you think that this game was put out intentionally unplayable?
No, I just think it's everybody is to blame in regards to why that game failed. There's the overextension of the programmer that said, I can do this, but then found he couldn't. There's the company publishing house itself putting up brick walls by saying, no, you can't have a Spectrum to to do this on. And no, you can't have a copy of the game so you know what it looks like. And you owe us a game and you've got a month deadline and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, what a software company that turns around and says all of that. So you could turn around and say it was a complete revenge and said, oh, okay, then sod you, and here's my tank. Because apparently there was a clause in the contract that turned around and said they reserve the right that if the game is not meet their quality control, they do not need to publish it. But they still published it. So
not once but twice.
Not once but twice.
So I think, if I remember right, I think the Commodore 64 one is playable.
Yeah.
But it's a Spectrum one that is utterly unplayable. You can't move.
Exactly. It's a totally different processor, which is why the Commodore 16 one works, because again, it's the 6502 processor
and from what I believe, the game is absolutely shit anyway.
It really is.
But it's become this infamous game that quite simply could not be played.
Yeah.
So
I count that. I don't know why ET gets such a bad rep when you look at that game.
Yeah, absolute nonsense. Absolutely not. I'm sure ET is going to crop up in one of these podcasts. But anyway, no arguments on that one. So game number 2.
Personally, because I just think it's absolutely awful. And I bought it and instantly taped over it. And that is the old favourite, Bionic Granny on the Commodore 64. I do not see one redeeming feature in the whole of that game. The sound is awful. The graphics is awful. The premise of the game is awful. It is just awful. That's it.
I mean, it's a cliched, terrible game on the Commodore 64, Bionic Granny. But as you say, I mean, the game, games before that came out and they were full price. Mastertronic came along with this new business model. They were going to sell games for $1.99. I thought, oh bloody hell, free, games for $1.99. But the payoff was it was shit like Bionic Granny, which is just it deserves its title of one of the worst games ever. There's no, as you say, there's no redeeming feature. I think you play the part of a triangle and you've got this downward stick that just keeps moving up and down, and you're trying to, what are you trying to do again? You try to kill children coming out of school or something?
Children coming out of school that have to go down 3 individual little roads that go right off left, right,
and
down.
You're hitting the kids with a stick.
With a lollipop or something. Wasn't it a lollipop stick or something?
It's I don't know, it's a white stick, whatever, but it's just it's hilariously bad. And was that not bloody Richard or David Darling that wrote it?
You know what? I haven't really checked to see who wrote it. I don't think it is. Might be under their label, and that's why we think. But I don't know. No, I don't think it is. But you know what?
I think
I'm going to have to look that up, aren't we?
Yeah. Have you got Google handy?
Let me have a little look then.
You have a look.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of the first. I mean, they obviously thought, well, wait a minute, what are they complaining about? We're only going to charge $1.99. What difference does it make if it's shit? We're giving them a computer game for £1.99 instead of $6.99. But what they didn't understand was they're giving you something that is just so bad you would play it for probably about a minute, and then you wouldn't go back to it. And you, case in point, you ended up taping over it with something.
Yeah.
Have you found out yet?
I've gone to Lemon 64 thinking that they're going to put who did the music, who did the graphics, and all of that. It's got the longest page review you'll ever come across. With an actual summary of the ratings. It's got graphics 1 out of 10, sound 1 out of 10, playability 1 out of 10, overall 1 out of 10. And the article has been read 14,260 times. I'm still struggling to find who wrote it. So hang on, I'm going to go to Wiki. So see whether that does it, because that was Lemon 64. So I'm going to put Bionic Granny Game Wiki,
and hopefully, I'm not going to be giving any spoilers away, but yeah, I mean, there's other games followed in the Mastertronic label, which were I don't think they were quite as bad. If Bionic Granny was, I would give it a big fat 0 out of 10. It was so bad you wouldn't want to play it. Other games that came out were maybe like 0.1 out of 10. But yeah, I'm hoping it wasn't Richard or David Darling.
There you go. The wiki says the developer of the game is not declared, but it is likely that, as for other early entry poor Mastertronic games, it is the Darling brothers who later became the founders of Codemasters, also authors of Game Creator, whose graphic engine this seems to reuse. So that's the reason why. But the actual coder is not declared.
They're not. I'm
unknown.
Yeah, I think we need to. I think we need to make that a quest to find out. I'm sure BMX Racer, BMX Rider, whatever it was. I'm positive that was Richard Darling, and that was. It was just a smidgen not as bad as BMX.
That's right, when you leapt over things and there was oil and all that.
It was absolutely god awful. But yeah, I mean it's quite simply, it has got no redeeming features at all.
Do you know what? You'll know this. What was that game? What was that cassette that came out which had 50 games on it? Was it just
Cascade 50?
Cascade 50. Yeah. I would rather have that tape than that one game.
Oh yeah. It was just utterly unplayable. It was just a yeah.
At least I'd learned programming from Cascade. Because all I'd have to do is hit run, stop, and look.
Can you record? I hope to God you recorded. You pirated one of the other Mastertronic games.
It was probably stole from you. To be quite honest, it was probably Chiller or something like that. Yeah,
and it's true what they said though. If you bring games out at $1.99, people won't pirate them. No bloody wonder, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, it was that says it all. When you have an original,
can you
tape.
Imagine though that game going over to America, where they don't know what tape drives are because they've always had disc drives, and they have to pay the disc drive price for that game.
Nobody could ever argue with that choice. It's maybe a slightly cliched answer, but you know, it was a fucking abysmal game. You can't even class it as a game. It was awful, and I think we need to make it we need to make it our bloody mission to find out, name and shame, who actually wrote that game. I think it was the Darling brothers. Yeah. I think they were the only two guys that were programming for Mastertronic at that point. But yeah, the only flip side is you probably got a better game in return.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, there's always a silver lining. You've got to look and say there's a negative and a positive, and I think the positive of that was you skipped the bullet and you got some.
You got a blank tape for $1.99, you know, and yeah. But even then, that was still you could probably buy a blank tape cheaper. But anyway, that is game number 2 and your final game of shame. What would it be?
Yeah. And like I say, it still follows that same rule set. It's nothing to do with loot crates or anything like that. We are moving higher now. We're moving to the ST and the Amiga. And I am sorry to say that I'm putting this one in because it's actually on par with other games by this company. The game is called Braticus for the ST and Amiga. Would you like me to explain what Braticus is?
Yeah, I know what it is, but I'll let you explain to the listeners what Braticus was.
So, Psygnosis was relatively new when I bought my A1000. Obviously, they were a company that had done games on the 8-bit under another name, and they'd pitched themselves as doing right. We're gonna do the next big boy games. And they had absolutely exceptional artwork for their boxes, the packaging, everything. You know, it looked absolutely amazing. Now, Braticus came out very, very early. In fact, it came out in a wave of games, like another title which was called Barbarian, and we're not going to confuse that with the sword wielding, chopping head off game that we all love from Palace. Barbarian is another similar type of game, that came from the same stables. But this one actually came out in the magazines as being something unusual. They said, "You have never seen such a powerful game as this game. You will never see graphics as smart and as sharp as this game. This game is the quintessential game that takes you into the next era of computer gaming." And it worded like that all the way through, and all of the previews seemed to indicate that's what was going to happen. And I loaded this game up. I couldn't wait. I'd got it home. I'd just spent $29.99 on this game. Right, and I'm one of these people that have got an A1000. There aren't many people. I think the A500 was just out, I think. And I loaded this thing up, and I was just praying that it was good, because only a couple of months before I'd bought this game called Barbarian. Oh, and that's another story. I loaded it up, and I thought, right, okay, well, the title screen looks all right. And then the graphics came on, and you tried to control it, and it was like playing in sludge. When you were walking, it was almost like every single limb on this creature, of this character that you had generated, was independently controlled. So you actually did control the shin and the thigh and the arm, because it moves so slowly. It moves like a puppet, a Jerry Anderson puppet across the screen. Not only that, but the other creatures that were on the screen, for which there were levels and all sorts of stuff, had little text boxes above their heads that told you what they were talking about. And they also could move in and out of the screen. So you can imagine these text boxes grew larger and smaller because they were sort of like at different planes.
Can you move in and out? Yeah.
And it literally, the screen, it looked like you could walk across the screen in about 4 seconds. It literally took you a minute and a half to get across the screen. It's like gravity didn't exist.
And was that down to just how poorly programmed it was?
It must. If they designed this super game like they were talking about, it must have been because the processor had not been invented at that time. That's all I could put it down to. It was abysmal. It was atrocious. It was. I was swearing from the moment I loaded it up to the moment I never played it again. And I tell you what, I didn't play it much, because it's almost, I'd rather go to the dentist to have root canals, on my teeth than play that game. And if you really want to have a laugh, just look at the poor sods that have bought it and gone on YouTube and showed you a walkthrough for it. Because I tell you what, I defy anybody to actually be able to get to the end of the damn game, let alone load it up and start with the first
If I recall, it was an ugly looking game as well.
It was
an early game. No, I can give you a wee bit. I can give you a bit of kind of backstory to this. Brackus, if you go back another, I don't know, 5 years, there was a company called Imagine, probably slightly more than that actually. Imagine Software. Now this isn't the Imagine Software that Ocean owned the label to. Imagine were one of the first computer game companies in the UK, and they put out all these games, and most of them were diabolical. Now it's everybody, anyone that's listening to this podcast will probably be fully aware of it, but Imagine gloriously went bust after about a year and a half. They basically weren't able to pay their bills. Famously, all the staff members, programmers, guys like Eugene Evans, he was like 17 years old. Apparently, he had a Ferrari company car, even though he couldn't even drive. All these guys are all on megabucks, and they went bust. But just before they went bust, they decided they were going to make 2 mega games, Bandersnatch and Cyclops. One was for the Commodore 64, one was for the Spectrum, and it was so powerful, so advanced, that it was going to have to come with an additional piece of hardware. And there's a great program called Commercial Breaks, which was a BBC series, and one of the episodes features Imagine Software and Ocean Software, and whilst the program was getting recorded, the bailiffs moved into Imagine Software, and the programmers went to lunch, and when they went to come back, they couldn't get in because basically their tea was out, as they say, and they went bust. And so yeah, and there's a hilarious bit where the marketing manager of Imagine Software goes to the publisher, and the guy's asking her a question, says, so what are you going to get with this? And she goes, oh, there's going to be 48 additional things in the box. And he went, 48? Yeah. They're going to be a t-shirt, there's going to be a badge, there's going to be this, there's going to be that, and da. And he's and how much will this game cost? £40. He went, £40? This is the average game, £6.99. You're going to charge £40. And of course, these two games are getting hyped beyond belief. There was these adverts of John Gibson, who sadly passed away fairly recently. He was called Grandad because he was like 32 years old when he was programming. Picture of him, Eugene Evans, and I think there was another two guys. And it was like, these guys are working their bollocks off to give you this incredible game. And then Imagine went bust, and these two mega games never saw the light of day. But if you watch commercial breaks, there's a little bit where John Gibson is shown he's working on this game, and the game that you see went on to become, what was it called again? Braticus. So that was like the fallout. That was the resultant output of these mega games. It went from being this incredible game to a game on a more powerful system, and as you've just mentioned there, it was garbage. So that game was originally going to be in the Spectrum, but it just it crashed and burned. But I'd love to have seen. If there's anyone out there that's got a boxed and complete version of not Braticus, Cyclops, or Bandersnatch, please hit me up. I want to know what the other 46 items that you're going to get in this box. It was just bloody ridiculous. I mean, they were completely... I don't know whether Peter Molyneux was involved in this.
We could actually get Arlosoft to do a 12-hour coding competition to make Braticus from scratch.
I'm sure he could
do a better job.
I'm sure he could do a far better job than what these guys did. But yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, I was a C64 man. Then I went to the ST, then the Amiga, and you kind of followed suit. And the early 16-bit games. I mean, unfortunately, Braticus there was lots of Braticuses out there for the Amiga and the ST. Companies thought that they could put out a really, really piss poor game. And because it was a new computer, it was a new generation, it was 16-bit, people, when you first got your computer, you would buy anything. You just wanted games for your computer. And so people were buying stuff like that. And as you say, Psygnosis and companies like, what were they called again? They did Crazy Cars and all that kind of stuff. They were putting out these really, really piss poor games, but they would have a digitized picture, and it would have some digitized guitar solo, and you're like, wow, this is going to be, listen to this. You're like, wow, that's incredible. And then you press the fire button, you're going, holy fuck. I'm looking at you, Crazy Cars and Crazy Cars 2. Titus Software, that's it, Titus Software.
Looped samples, yeah.
They were terrible.
I'm glad we're past sort of like that. Yeah.
So Braticus could pretty much summarize all the early 16-bit games. But yeah, I'm fortunate I've never actually played Braticus. I have tried it. I think, was it a particular version that you didn't like, or were both equally as piss?
Both equally as piss. And the only reason I say that is although I didn't have an Atari ST as hardware, I did play it on emulation. Mm-hmm. I had the Amiga, and I tried it on an Amiga 2000 and an A1000.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2000's got slightly faster processor, made no jot of difference whatsoever. Not a jot of difference. Focus.
So yeah, I'm sure. I hope you sleep okay tonight, mate.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry for
that
doing
game
this
now.
so late. You know, you're going to give me bloody shivers in the middle of the night. I'm going to wake up screaming. Bloody cyanosis.
I like to laugh and look back at that time, because there was a glimmer of hope, though, Alan. You know, we had some Defender of the Crown's Marble Madnesses. Don't get us wrong. It's just that Psygnosis promised so much and delivered so little too many times for me to not put Braticus in. And just to end this, my honourable mention was Rise of the Robots, but Braticus beats it every time.
Yeah.
That's the end of my selection.
Well, listen, mate.
So much.
That's that kind of pretty much that brings this podcast to an end. I just want to say a big thanks to having you on. You're always somebody that people want to see in my channel, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, and it's nice to have you on this podcast. I just want to apologise to the listeners. Like I says, if we're going to, please sleep easy. These games don't exist anymore. Dell suffered. You don't have to.
I've suffered, so you don't have to.
Yeah. Rest easy. If you hear any noises in the middle of the night, it's not Braticus or any of these other games, Bionic Granny or whatever the hell it was called. So listen, viewers, thank you very, very much for listening. I will be back again, hopefully next week or whenever, with another nice and nasty. Thanks again then, Dale. Take care, man.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.